Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever it is that you are and wherever you may be. Thank you very much for making us a part of your day. I am Brad Franklin, Digital Media Relations Manager here in Chesterfield. Very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again. Now, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, obviously we are not in a studio. If we were, this is a pretty cool studio to be in, though I think that the folks of this time would probably not think of, well, they wouldn't know what a studio is. So obviously we are here at historic Henricus. I guess it's Henricus Historical Park. I was going to make a joke about history, but anyway, we'll let that softball pass me by. We're here today to talk about History Happened Here, which literally we are in a place where history happened. Henricus is one of the jewels of this entire area, this entire Commonwealth, and there's a lot that goes on here that some folks later are going to talk a little bit more about. I'm going to start with JC Poma, who is the director of our Sports Visitation and Entertainment Department. JC, welcome back to the podcast, sir. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I think we need a history to that.
Ooh, I like that. Where do you want to stick it? Sports Visitation, History, and Entertainment?
Yeah.
we'll
talk
workshop
about that.
Yeah,
after.
we'll workshop it. So JC is here because his shop is launching or has launched a campaign called History Happened Here, which is essentially, well, actually, you know what? I'm gonna be quiet and I'm gonna let JC explain that in a second. First, I want to start with a quick question for folks who may not know. You've been on the show, but for folks maybe who aren't as familiar with your department and kind of what you guys do, tell us a little about yourself and your department and kind of the things that you guys are involved with.
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having our department on and
Absolutely
telling stories. That's what I think we're all here to do, is continue storytelling of Chesterfield, and in this case, our history. But
right.
The Sports Visitation and Entertainment Department was started almost 2 years ago, so we're coming up on the 2-year mark. And, twofold. One is we know we are a part of a vast organization where so many folks are committed to enhancing the quality of life for our residents.
Right.
We do that twofold, and one is to invigorate our visitor economy to then provide a better quality of life for our residents. And so there's so many ways to do that, and we're here really adding one kind of experiential element to that, which is history, from sports, entertainment, storytelling, both nationally, regionally, and locally.
Right.
We're trying to shine a light on Chesterfield that we haven't done before in conjunction with departments like yourself. Yeah. We just do it through a little bit, different of a spin, which is through the visitor's eyes. Right. But us as residents sitting here in Henricus, at this point, I'm willing to bet a lot of people know what Henricus is. Right. But as you'll hear from the real history experts, there's a lot of things that people don't know. Right. Yeah. And that's what this story, really, this campaign was meant to do. But again, we're blessed to have the backing of our Board of Supervisors, county administration, to hyper local storytell. Yeah. And today, let's do that through history. Yeah. So how did this whole thing, History Happened Here, how did it sort of come about? What was the sort of eureka moment that you guys sort of put together and thought, hey, this would be a really cool thing for Chesterfield County? It was a group effort. I think, Brad, you were sitting in that room, and you look at, sports visitation and entertainment. And when we launched Experience Chesterfield last April, it really had a lot of core pillars. And we all know that surrounding Henricus is a huge outdoor recreation scene in the Dutch Gap Conservation Area. Right. That launch of Experience Chesterfield, or should I say relaunch of Experience Chesterfield, was really about different pillars of our county. Right. History was definitely a pillar to start. Right. We kind of went about it at a 30,000-foot level. Right. Like you do for most things on a website. Right. But today, what you're going to hear and what the intention behind this campaign was really twofold. We had two goals when we started this campaign. The first was really to position Chesterfield, and I think we mean this when we say it, as Virginia and the nation's most consequential county to shape American history and innovation. Right. Yeah. I'm not going to spoil the rest of the podcast, but there is so much that our residents don't know. Yeah. And if our residents don't know, how do they create a sense of pride and quality of life for living here? Right. That second objective is literally just that, to create pride about the impact Chesterfield had in really America's early days all the way through today. Yeah. Our economic development department, right down the road from here, had a major announcement a couple weeks ago. Right. I can guarantee you, long after we're gone from here, there's going to be another History Happened Here campaign, and that project will probably be a part of it. So it really is looking back on our history through what everyone is doing today, and creating pride at the community level is what we're all here for. Right. And then creating an economic impact of that pride through the ROI of tourism is something we've bought into because it really diversifies our economy.
Yeah, and I mean, the truth of it all is, right, I think the first, coal, commercial coal was here, and to think that, the first commercial fusion could be here. And the idea, too, to your point about just sort of there are so many people who maybe they've heard a story here or there, but to think about the totality of history that happened here in Chesterfield County. To your point, we've got some folks coming on here in a few minutes that will get really in the weeds on that history. But so much of it is, in this exact soil, in places just like this throughout the county. I think as we sort of wrap up here, in terms of putting this campaign together, what are some of the things folks can look forward to? What are some of the things, how are things shaping up as we sort of get deeper into this period of time? Because we all know Rev War, the 250 is coming not too far away, right? The first shot at Lexington and Concord feels like, it'll be here before we know it. Folks will be on horseback riding into Ebbington before we know it. How are things sort of shaping up in terms of what folks can expect from this campaign?
Well, shameless plug here. All of our colleagues from the Sports Visitation Entertainment and constituent media service department are here, so we must throw in the plug to follow our social media channels, because that's where a lot of this content is getting released.
Right.
We will funnel that through Experience Chesterfield and shared by our county assets. But I encourage you to go there, because on a weekly basis, they're doing things like trivia and things that to really kind of go down this route of things you didn't know, from individuals who have shaped American history.
Right.
And so I say that there is a very targeted approach throughout this year based on special events at, so many of our historic sites to kind of dig in to the role that each of these sites has played in both Chesterfield and Americans' history. And so I say that, the next 4, 5, 6 months, we're going to tell it through the eyes of our resident first.
Cool.
We will then partner with other organizations to really begin to translate that into something that can have increased visitation. And in today's world, we've talked a lot about this. I think when I was on your last podcast, we have access to so many types of data to be able to track what moves the needle. And we know that there is so much potential for these attractions throughout Chesterfield County to drive people from outside of the area.
Right.
That it's an economic cycle, and we're really looking forward to trying to increase visitation of these, but most importantly, continue to storytell in bringing it all together in one place. I think that's one thing we learned. Is that Chesterfield's done a great job of telling stories through, let's say, our park and recreation department's eyes, or whether that's through, the county museum there on the grounds. We haven't brought it into one central source. And in today's world, all of you know better than we do, but we've got to do that digitally first. And so really bringing all of the stories together. We'll be launching blogs on weekly, monthly basis.
Cool.
The ones that are up there now, is a really interesting one. It's probably more at the 30,000 foot level, which is, we call it Chesterfield's first. You alluded to some of them.
Yep.
From the first commercial roadway, all the way to, think about what moves coal, railroads, all those sorts of things. Yep. And so we'll then kind of start dialing it into very hyper local stories. The specific story of Bermuda 100. And, I won't spoil the fun, but really kind of taking it from a 30,000 foot level down to the individual sites, moments in history. That's what we're all about. And I think it'll be really engaging. So please follow those channels. We'll get it out through various means as well. But using something like what we're doing today is a great resource.
Cool. Well, JC, I appreciate you being here. Right here in historic Henricus Park, as I'm just going to butcher that all day, apparently. But thank you very much for the time, JC. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
No matter where you find yourself in Chesterfield, chances are you're close to major moments in history. It's time to get up to speed on the history that happened here. You've heard about Henricus, the second settlement in English North America, but did you know that what happened in Henricus shaped our country? Today, it's a living history museum that reminds us that we're part of something bigger. Next came breakthroughs in industry and energy. 1619 marked the beginning of the steel and iron industry in America, and later, the first commercial coal mines opened at what is today known as Midlothian Mines Park. Groundbreaking innovation right here in Chesterfield. And during times of conflict, history also happened here. In the Revolutionary War, Chesterfield held strong when the British invaded Chesterfield Courthouse, raiding barracks and supplies for the Continental Army. Or when the Civil War brought devastation, Claire Barton, founder of the American Red Cross, set up a hospital at Point of Rocks to care for thousands of wounded soldiers. It was at Point of Rocks that President Lincoln visited Union troops to show support during a pivotal time near the end of the war in 1865. Then came the Gilded Age, and Bon Air was a picture of high society. The historic community was a posh getaway from the hustle and bustle of city life. A drive down Buford Road today, and you're right there back in time. At Pleasant View School, the power of community meant black children could receive an education during segregation. This one-room schoolhouse teaches us to always keep pushing. On any given day, you're alongside history in the place that you call home. From America's earliest moments, Chesterfield played a pivotal role in shaping our nation's history. So, tell your friends, history happened here.
We're now back here in Henricus. I keep calling it historic Henricus instead of Henricus Historical Park, which I'm really glad you weren't in the room when I was doing that. I'm glad that you're here now and I got it right. I'm very glad to welcome these two gentlemen who have been on the podcast before, talking about different sorts of history. I've got John Pagano. I got Bryan Truzzie. First off, let me let you guys introduce yourselves. John, we'll start with you in all of your full regalia.
Yeah, I'm John Pagano. I'm the Historical Interpretation Supervisor at Henricus Historical Park.
Cool. And Bryan?
I'm Bryan Truzzie, Historic Site Supervisor for Chesterfield County Parks and Recreation.
Awesome. Now, we're here today, obviously, to talk about history happened here. And I don't know two people who I work with regularly who know that those three words they ring more true than the two of you, right? Because I feel like history is something you both deal with on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour basis. Some of us, obviously, in much cooler clothes when we do that. But first of all, I want to start with sort of talking real quick about a sense of sort of the work that you two do. Let's see, Bryan. Let's start with you. How would you sort of describe your role with Parks and Recreation?
So the great thing is I'm not doing the same thing in day in and day out. Yeah. So it varies from everything from in the summer doing camps for youth to event planning and organization, organizing a variety of different historical programming, which could range everything from walking tours at a lot of our historic sites to historical van tours, public speaking engagements, doing programs also for our Chesterfield Historical Society of Virginia.
Cool. And John, how would you sort of describe what you do here at Henricus?
Sure. Well, I supervise the interpreters. So pretty much for us, it's public programming in addition to the school groups. But our given day pretty much is dressing in period clothing, coming out here, doing our period tasks. Our visitors pay admission. They come through the gates. And our job is to encounter them and to give them several different vignettes about what was taking place here over 400 years ago. Cool. In addition to that, for me, my work is to do a lot of research for various people and agencies through the county when needed, and certainly through our director and all the staff here. So I pretty much am the chief nerd of
the chief nerd. Yeah. You should put that on a business card. Yeah. Before we get to the actual questions I want to ask, I do want to ask one quick follow-up, which was, the whole point of this podcast is about history that happened here. We're going to get to that in a hot second, but I'm curious just for the both of you, when did the history bug catch? Was it immediate? Were you kids and you just couldn't get enough, whether it was school or outside of school? When did the history bug sort of get a hold of you, John?
Yeah, that was an interpreter named Shelton. He was at the Sands Ring Homestead in Cornwall, New York, and I was in fourth grade, and they bring us over there on a field trip to do local history, New York history. And when I went into that homestead, it's colonial house, and he's there in his colonial attire and his ponytail, looking like a person from long ago. He did chores with us, put the stuff in our hands and made that magic happen in a tactile environment. Right. And that stuck with me, and that made its way into my professional pursuits. Yeah.
And what about you, Bryan? When did the history bug catch?
I guess I've always really loved history from a young age, from probably middle school age. My father was a history teacher. Okay. And so I always learned a lot of history. That was one of his passions, one of his favorite subjects. And our parents really, instilled in us to want to learn more and think outside the box and not just sort of stay in the comfort zone. And so, unlike, from a lot of different people, we didn't travel to different historic sites when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. We were always going to horse shows for my sister, so we didn't really have the chance we weren't close to anything in Ohio to really take that in. So it was a lot of reading, and then of course when I grew up, then having an opportunity to really explore and experience a lot of that.
Yeah. I want to get your initial thoughts on History Happened Here. Obviously, you both have been, and there's been, I don't know how many meetings and things that talk about this kind of stuff, but I'm just curious to get sort of your initial thoughts, and especially toward the potential for something like this, because one of the things, New York, Ohio, I'm a native Virginian, and just the level of history that is in the dirt in the Commonwealth, and especially here in Chesterfield County, it's kind of astonishing, to be honest with you, because I feel like every time I hear one of you two talk, I learn something else about something that happened here. And I think that title, right, History Happened Here, is just so apropos. So, Bryan, what are your sort of initial thoughts on what this campaign can do for Chesterfield County and for those who are interested in what happened here in Chesterfield County?
I think this is going to be a really shot in the arm, something that's been long overdue, and something that's going to be really insightful and helpful for the public and the residents here to really showcase and really toot our horn here in Chesterfield County with the diversity of the history that we have to offer here. Well over 400 years, and there's something for everyone to really learn about, and a great way to help promote our programming, our special events, and just to make everyone a little bit more better educated on the history that we have here in the county.
Right. What about you, John? What do you think?
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, Bryan. We have 400 years of history, from our native past to our colonists, and then through the centuries, and here we are today.
Right.
And so for us here, we have an opportunity in Virginia, which it's the Old Dominion, it's the original Commonwealth, and that depth of history is special. Even from New York, where I'm from, which has a lot of robust history, when you get down to the enduring stories and how we find that relevance to the past, the layers of history Chesterfield has, you will find something there that you will connect with. And I think that's a really important part for me as a public history and a servant of the people, is to make sure that you do find something in these various stories.
Right. You mentioned enduring history and enduring stories. Let's start there, John. Let's get into the history. What are some of the things from Chesterfield's past that really stand out to you the most? And it does, admittedly, I bet you could go on a pretty substantial soliloquy here, monologue, if you will, about all of those things. But give me some highlights of what are some of the things that really stand out to you the most about history here in Chesterfield.
Yeah, I think when you study history and you're introduced to new periods, new things, new topics, you kind of go, wow. Yeah. There's a wow moment. And for me, I think I'll deal with the early stuff because that's what I'm mostly in at this point in our discussions. I look at the native stuff, the principal tribe that was here, the Appomattox Indians, part of Powhatan's chiefdom. And one of the things I read in my work here is this young woman leader named Cominsky. She is actually co-leading her people with her brother. And she is one of the first to meet the English, and she is then one of the first to fight the English. She's kind of the opposite Pocahontas. So she's more militant. And I look at that and I go, if I did not come here to Chesterfield and I wasn't focusing on the local history, I wouldn't have encountered her name. And I wouldn't be able to engage the public on that discussion of who these people were and what their interactions were in the colonial past, so when I look at that and I think, boy, and then you have the English colonists coming here and it's men like Sir Thomas Dale. There is nobody in this colony that's like Dale. He is the Darth Vader of this period. And
as a Star Wars person, I got that reference.
Yeah. So whoever's into Star Wars, you'll appreciate that. And you look at that story and you start encountering his team. Reverend Alexander Whitaker, who becomes Pocahontas' teacher, and Dale, who is responsible for her time up until her marriage to John Rolfe. You have these people that if you're somewhere else, you probably don't stop for a moment and look at that. And I think that transcends throughout the next so many decades and into the years. When we get to the American Revolution, you're now finding these people here that are from the foundations of English society that are now going against English society. From Archibald Carey to some of his neighbors, and then the events of the revolution here. And I really have transformed in my professional pursuit, looking at somebody who, for me, I came down here, I think maybe the 19th century was more of my expertise, but now I feel like the interest in this time period kind of just absorbs me.
Yeah, it grabbed you, it pulled you back.
It grabs me, and it's not just one perspective; it's many perspectives.
Right.
And I look at this period that you see me dressed like this, and here we are in this church, and I can't help but thinking of the many types of people that were in this church.
Right.
And here they are thinking about their past back home in England.
Oh, right. Yeah, good point.
And now here we are thinking about our past and what's our future going to be.
Yeah, good stuff. Bryan, what about you? What are some of the things in Chesterfield's history that really stand out to you the most?
I'd have to say for me, there's a lot of great variety with the history that we have here within the county. One of the main focal points for me is really looking at a lot of the industrial history.
Okay.
Because we're working on, and this is really great timing, because we're working on planning a major event here the latter part of March, focusing on the impact of the iron industry here. And so we had the beginning of the birth of heavy industry that started right here, all the way back in 1619 with the ironworks at Falling Creek, which is a fascinating story in itself. Granted, it was short-lived, but had that survived, that was really going to open the door for heavy industry throughout the region. Another big story, of course, is the impact of the coal mining that we had through the area here, with some of the earliest commercial coal mines, which gave rise to some of the best quality coal in the country, and the development of the first railroad that ever existed in the state of Virginia, which was a gravity-fed rail line before they even had steam locomotives, and then the Midlothian Turnpike evolves from that as a better source of transportation to haul all that coal. I think the transportation stories are important when you think of the river commerce on the Appomattox, and the locks and bateau history earlier here in the county is really important. And a lot of people may not realize the impact that we had with grist mills and textile mills here in the county in areas like Ettrick and Matoaka. We had some of the largest textile mills that ever existed in the entire country, and it was right here in our own backyard. You look at the industrial history, the transportation, a lot of the earlier black history that we have here in the county, with some of the preserved African-American schools and the story of the Rosenwald Fund to build over 5,000 schools for the African-American children throughout the Deep South. And we had nearly 6 Rosenwald schools that were built here in Chesterfield County. We have Pleasant View School that still survives today, which, while it wasn't a Rosenwald school, was very similar to that. And there's just a lot of unique themes here with the military history, industrial history, transportation to really focus on.
You just said unique themes, which kind of keyed something in my mind as we sort of wrap up here. One of the things I think I love about this is that most of what you guys just said, none of it really overlapped one-to-one. You're talking about just a vast sort of canvas, right, of all kinds of history and all different types. And I think that's one of the things that is so unique about Chesterfield, is there's so much there. And that's what I think this campaign is all about, right, is like putting what is all there out there for folks to see, both locally for folks to understand sort of the history of their own backyard, to what Bryan just said, but then also too to bring in the people from the outside, to have them come here and learn more about some of the things that were essential to not just Chesterfield County, this region, the state, but this country, right? And I think that's one of the cool things about what's happening here in this campaign. So I get you out here on this one. What are you most excited for people to learn during this sort of campaign, Bryan? What are some of the things that you're most looking forward to folks finding out about?
So some of the different stories that people here may not know a whole lot about in detail is the unique story surrounding Old Victorian Bon Air. And how this resort community was established back in the late 1800s with this desire to create this large resort area and bring people here from Richmond to escape the heat of the city in the summertime here and even in the winter. And with all of these unique activities here and the beautiful Bonaire hotel that was built, these a beautiful pavilion, dance pavilion.
High society, for real.
It was, and it was very short-lived. And that's one of the things I do with one of my van tours is educate people about the history of what actually existed here in Old Bonaire. The other another great story would be going into detail about all of the history with the mill history that happened here within the county, focusing on all of the grist mills. I mean, if you think about it, these go back over 400 years to the earliest mills being old sawmills. That then ventured into tanneries, and then the grist mills along the James, the Appomattox, even Falling Creek and other small tributaries that led to the eventual rise of some of these enormous textile mills that happened here. So there's a lot of really unique little stories that I think people who may not live in Chesterfield County would really find fascinating.
All right, John, close this out. What are you most excited for folks to learn about during this campaign?
You know, I've always been excited about our 17th century story. You know, there's a lot there, and especially because it's very foreign to people. So we have that to do. But in recent years, it's our work with the Chesterfield 250th anniversary.
Right. Yep.
You know, Chesterfield has a lot, if not some of the best Revolutionary War history in Virginia. Yeah. And most people would never know that because it's not marked, it's not put down anywhere.
Right. Yep.
And one of those things that I'm going to point at, probably I think as Bryan knows, we're looking to put in our whole new Wayside series of signs across the county. Right. Our first are going to go in at Chesterfield Courthouse. Right. And I usually leave it with this topic, is that the Continental Army is going to be, formed at Chesterfield Courthouse in the last 2 years of the war. For several months at Chesterfield Courthouse, you have an early vision of modern-day America. It's a very curious cast of characters. You have white and black Virginians serving together in the Continental Army, serving, training at that location, and you have women who are contracted to work with those military organizations. So in the same camp, working towards a war effort, you have black and white and women all serving together for one cause, to form a republic. Yeah. And I think once we get that interpretive station set up and begin that journey, it's going to connect the 17th century with our robust 19th century and what took place in the 18th century here in Chesterfield.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you very much for your time. I very much appreciate you coming on, talking to us about history happened here. Again, two people that I know have a good feel for a lot of the history that happened here, and I'm really looking forward to what this campaign will do for a lot of folks. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Yep. All right. Now, make sure to check us out on social media. On Twitter, it's at Chesterfield VA, and on Instagram, it's Chesterfield Virginia on Word, and on Facebook, you can check out our podcast page. Just search Chesterfield Behind the Mic. Now, make sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, or wherever it is that you get your shows. And if you're so inclined to give us a rating or review, we greatly appreciate it. As always, a video version of our show is available on our YouTube channel as well as on our website, chesterfield.gov/podcast. That's also where you can submit feedback anytime, make a suggestion, or just reach out to us. You can watch the show on WCCT Thursday through Sunday at 7 and the weekends at noon. That is Comcast Channel 28, Comcast Channel 98, Verizon Channel 28. Lastly, check out chesterfield.gov/connect with us to find out a number of other ways to connect with Chesterfield County. My thanks to my director, Martin Stith, my executive producer, Teresa, Bonifas, and all the good folks from Constituent Media Services for all they do. My thanks to you for joining us today. So from all of us here in Chesterfield, thanks again for making us a part of your day. We'll see you again real soon. Take good care. From blogs to podcasts. And I'm very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again. Weekly video segments and newsletters, social media, the latest community news.
And this is your Chesterfield News Minute for September 19th.
How to get in touch, and everything in between. If you want to know about Chesterfield County, our Connect With Us webpage has you covered. Chesterfield.gov/connect with us. Connect with us, your source for all things Chesterfield.